Life doesn't always unfold the way you expect. Sometimes people come into your world and shatter the rules you've relied on. Sometimes, emotions you never anticipated begin to stir, leaving you unsure of who you are or who you're becoming. That's where I find myself now, standing in a mess of contradictions I never saw coming. Looking back, I'm not proud of what happened, but I can't deny it shaped me into who I am today. One decision, one fleeting moment unraveled everything. It led to a chain of secrets, confusion, and guilt. And at the heart of it all was something I couldn't admit. My feelings for Liam, my brother. We weren't a close family, not in the way some people are. Politeness and surface-level niceties kept us connected, but there was no deep bond. Liam was 5 years younger than me, and for most of my life, we existed in different worlds. While I was navigating high school drama, he was still a kid watching cartoons. By the time I left for college, he was awkwardly stumbling through puberty. When I returned home after graduation, though, everything was different. Liam wasn't the shy, awkward boy I remembered. He had grown up in my absence. Suddenly he was taller, his features sharper, his demeanor confident in a way I hadn't expected. He was smart, kind, and much to my dismay, undeniably attractive. At first I dismissed it, chalking it up to some strange fluke of perception. But as time passed, I realized the feeling was real. It was undeniable. One evening, we were sitting outside under the stars, reminiscing about our childhood. Laughter filled the night air, as we teased each other about the ridiculous things we used to do. And then out of nowhere Liam said something that shook me. "You know, I've always looked up to you," he said softly, his voice laced with something I couldn't quite place. "But lately, I don't think I see you the way I used to." His words hung in the air, heavy and charged. My heart raced, a chaotic rhythm that didn't make sense. I forced a nervous smile and tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but it was too late. Those words lingered between us, unspoken yet undeniably present. Over the next few weeks, I found myself noticing things I shouldn't. The way his eyes lingered on me just a little too long. The way he sought out reasons to be close. He'd come into the kitchen while I cooked, hang out in my room under the pretense of talking about his day, or sit just a little too close when we watched TV together. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Families are supposed to be close, I reasoned. But this wasn't closeness, it was tension. A magnetic, unspoken pull that I didn't dare acknowledge. It all came to a head on a rainy Sunday afternoon. The storm outside had left us both trapped indoors, bored and restless. Liam suggested we play a card game we used to love as kids. I laughed, joking that he'd probably win. The game started innocently enough, but as we played, the air between us grew heavier. Every time our hands brushed while exchanging cards, it felt like an electric current passed between us. At one point our hands touched, lingering just a moment too long. It was a fleeting contact, but it froze me in place. I looked at him, and he looked back, his eyes searching mine. "You felt it too, didn't you?" he asked softly. Panic surged through me. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered, pulling my hand away and standing up quickly. But Liam wasn't about to let it go. He followed me into the living room, his expression serious. "Don't do this," he said. "Don't pretend like it didn't happen. It's not right," I blurted out, my voice trembling. "We can't feel this way." "Why not?" he challenged, his voice steady and firm. "I know how we're supposed to be, but I can't control how I feel. And I don't think you can either." I had no answer. I stood there, torn in two, knowing that no matter what I did, someone would get hurt. After that day, everything between us shifted. We didn't talk about what happened, but the weight of it lingered in every moment we shared. Every glance, every word, every accidental touch was charged with an undercurrent we couldn't name but couldn't ignore. I tried to keep my distance, burying myself in job applications and social outings, but Liam wouldn't let me disappear. He found excuses to spend time with me, helping with chores, suggesting we watch movies, or simply sitting with me in silence. And the worst part, I wanted him there. One night, we were watching a romantic movie together, though neither of us paid attention. The rain outside cast a soft, rhythmic backdrop, and the dim light made everything feel intimate. I felt his presence beside me, every breath, every shift of his body, and I knew I couldn't run from this anymore. I don't remember exactly how it started, but at some point, I found my head resting on Liam's shoulder. It was such a small, seemingly insignificant gesture, but it felt like I had crossed a line. He didn't move or say anything, yet the air between us felt heavy, charged with unspoken words. "You're making this hard," he finally said, his voice quiet and almost fragile. I lifted my head, feigning confusion. "Am I making this hard?" I asked, pretending not to understand, though we both knew I did. He gestured vaguely between us, his eyes searching mine. "There's something here. Between us." "There is no us, Liam," I said, forcing the words out, my voice barely steady. "Then why does it feel like there is?" I had no answer. My chest felt tight, my mind a swirl of contradictions. I muttered something about being tired, stood up abruptly, and fled to my room, thinking that putting physical distance between us might help. But I was wrong. Not long after, there was a soft knock at my door. "Liam, I'm really not in the mood," he interrupted, his voice firm. "Please." I hesitated, but something in his tone made me open the door. He stepped inside, shutting it behind him, and for a moment, we just stood there in silence. The air between us was heavy, thick with everything unsaid. "I don't care what anyone thinks," he said, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I care what you think. How you feel." "I can't do this, Liam," I said, my voice breaking. "This isn't just about us. There are consequences. There's our family, our lives, everything we've built. It's not fair." "Fairness doesn't matter," he said, stepping closer. "I'm not asking you to do anything right now. I'm just asking you to be honest. Do you feel it too?" His question hung in the air, a weight I wasn't ready to bear. My heart raced, my thoughts scrambled. Admitting the truth would mean everything would change. There would be no going back. I stood there frozen, every part of me screaming to say no, to deny it, to end it. But I couldn't. "Liam," I began, my voice trembling, my resolve crumbling. "I don't know. That's not an answer," he said softly, his eyes locked on mine. And for a moment, I felt exposed, as though he could see right through me. The truth was there, undeniable, in every glance, every word, every unspoken moment between us. But saying it aloud would make it real. Saying it aloud would destroy everything. "I can't," I whispered, turning away from him, desperate to put some distance between us. "You already have," he replied quietly. I didn't respond, my back to him, trying to suppress the emotions threatening to overwhelm me. But then I felt him take a step closer, his voice trembling now. "Please," he said. "Please be honest with me. I need to know I'm not crazy." I wanted to deny it. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that this was all in his head. But the words wouldn't come. The silence between us was deafening. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. "I don't know how I feel," I finally whispered. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, a mixture of heartbreak and understanding in his expression. "I won't pressure you," he said. "But I'm here. And I want you to know how I feel." With that, he left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. For the next few days, I buried myself in work, desperately trying to distract myself. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop thinking about Liam. And he didn't make it any easier. He was always there, in small, almost imperceptible ways. Bringing me coffee in the morning, brushing past me with a light touch, sitting casually next to me at dinner. Every interaction felt like a test, as if he was waiting for me to say or do something. One evening, while sitting in the living room, I noticed a small notebook on the coffee table. At first, I thought it was mine, but when I opened it, I realized it was Liam's. It was filled with sketches, notes, and fragments of poetry, things I never knew he did. But then I found a page near the back, and my heart sank. It was about me. The words were raw, honest, and unfiltered. He didn't just see me as his sister. He saw me as someone he admired, someone he longed for. Every sentence was laced with emotions he could no longer contain. I knew I should stop reading, but I couldn't. Every word pulled me deeper into the reality I had been trying to avoid. It wasn't just feelings anymore. It was real, written in ink, impossible to ignore. That diary changed everything. It shattered the fragile barrier I had built around my emotions. And as much as I didn't want to admit it, his words reflected my own buried feelings. The next morning, I avoided him completely. I couldn't face him, not after what I had read. But Liam was never someone you could avoid for long. By evening, he found me sitting in the backyard, staring blankly at the horizon. "You've been silent all day," he said, sitting down beside me. "I've been thinking," I replied, trying to sound casual, though my voice betrayed me. "About?" he asked, his tone cautious yet curious. I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at the fading light on the horizon, wishing it could somehow pull me away from the weight of his presence. But Liam wasn't someone who would let a question go unanswered. And deep down, I knew I couldn't keep running forever. I hesitated, my fingers nervously tracing the hem of my sweater as I avoided Liam's gaze. "I found your diary," I admitted, the words hanging in the air between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke, and then I heard him let out a sharp breath. "I didn't mean for you to see it," he said softly, his voice laced with guilt. "I know," I replied, my voice almost a whisper. "But I did, and now I don't know what to do." He swallowed, his voice a little shaky when he spoke again. "About us." I finally turned to face him, and his expression was a mix of fear and hope, both so raw that it tore at my heart. "I don't want to make this harder for you," he said, his words low, almost pleading. "But I can't pretend anymore. I feel it." I tried to push the words away, tried to deny the truth of it all. "I don't know if I can do this," I said, my voice breaking under the weight of it. "It's too complicated, too wrong." "It doesn't have to be," he said, reaching out to take my hand gently, his touch sending a shiver down my spine. "We don't have to figure everything out right now. I just need to know. Do you feel the same way?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him it was all a mistake, that we could go back to the way things were. But I couldn't lie to him anymore. "Yes," I whispered, barely able to get the word out, my heart racing with the truth I couldn't deny. "But that doesn't mean it's right." Admitting it was like opening a floodgate. And in the weeks that followed, Liam and I found ourselves constantly on edge. We danced around our feelings, never crossing the line, but never fully keeping our distance either. Every conversation, every touch, felt like we were walking a tightrope. One slip, and everything could come crashing down. Then came the night that would change everything. It was late, the house silent and still as everyone else slept. I was in the kitchen, my mind restless, unable to escape the thoughts swirling in my head. Liam walked in, his footsteps soft on the tile floor. "You're up late," he said, his voice low. He grabbed a glass of water, and I replied without looking at him, my eyes focused on anything but him. "Can't sleep," I muttered, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. He set the glass down, turned to face me, and his eyes were filled with something intense, something I didn't know how to deal with. "We need to talk." I felt a knot tighten in my chest, but I already knew what he was going to say. "About this?" I asked, though I could barely breathe as the words left my lips. He nodded, his expression serious. "I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. I need to know where we stand." The question was like a weight on my shoulders, pushing me further into a corner I wasn't sure I could escape from. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely audible. "I honestly don't know what to do, Liam. Every part of me is telling me this is wrong, but I can't stop feeling what I'm feeling." "Then stop resisting," he said softly, his voice steady despite the tension. "Come closer." "I can hardly make a sound," I whispered, my throat tight. "It's too heavy, too dangerous." "Then make it simple for me," he said, his eyes searching mine with such intensity it took my breath away. "Do you want me to go away? Because if you need it, I'll leave and never bring this up again. But if you want me to stay." His ultimatum hung in the air, and for a moment I was speechless. He was giving me a way out, an escape from this mess. But was that what I really wanted? I knew whatever I decided, there would be no going back. Liam stood there waiting, his gaze unwavering. His words were like a drumbeat in my chest, pushing me to make a decision. My heart ached, knowing that once I spoke, everything would change. "Liam." My voice trembled as I finally began to speak. "I don't want to lose you, but I don't know how we can make this work without ruining everything." His expression softened, but the determination in his eyes didn't waver. "I'm not asking for everything to be resolved right now," he said. "I'm just asking you to make a choice. Do you want me to stay or not?" Tears welled up in my eyes, and I felt my heart break at the thought of saying goodbye to him. I wanted to tell him to leave, to make it all go away, to pretend none of this had ever happened. But I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. I don't want you to go, I whispered, my voice barely audible. For a moment, it seemed like he couldn't believe what he was hearing, like the words had been too much for him to hope for. But then, without saying another word, he stepped closer and wrapped his arms around me. It wasn't romantic, wasn't some grand gesture. It was simply comforting, safe understanding. We'll work through it, he whispered, his voice a promise. The days that followed were a strange mix of relief and fear. Liam and I grew more cautious in public, constantly aware of how others might perceive us. We started looking for moments, however brief, to speak openly, without the weight of secrets hanging over us. But the calm didn't last. Secrets have a way of coming to light. One evening, as Liam and I whispered on the porch, our oldest cousin Ellie suddenly appeared, her gaze sharp and knowing. We froze, unsure of how much she had overheard. Nothing, I blurted out too quickly, trying to sound casual, but Ellie wasn't buying it. You two have been acting strange for weeks, she said, narrowing her eyes. Don't tell me it's nothing. Liam opened his mouth, but I cut him off. We've just been spending more time together. That's all, I said, trying to brush it off, but my words felt like a lie. Ellie didn't look convinced, but she dropped the subject for the time being. Still, the tension between us only grew. Later that night, Liam and I sat in my room, and I could feel the weight of what we had just avoided. She knows, I whispered, my voice trembling. Liam's face hardened, but he didn't break. She's not a fool. But we'll deal with it. I shook my head, feeling the panic rise in my chest. What if she figures it out? What if she tells someone? We'll work it out, he said firmly, his voice unwavering. I'm not walking away just because things are getting difficult. His words were meant to reassure me, but they didn't dispel the fear that gnawed at my insides. Ellie wasn't the kind of person who would let something like this slide, and I knew she would start asking questions soon. The secret we were keeping was heavy, and it weighed on me more than I cared to admit. Liam and I had made our choice, but now we had to live with the consequences. Would it be worth it? Or would it all fall apart in the end?